So how did did it in any way led you to think that you would go into art or design? Your love for comics.
Um, you see, I have an appreciation for comics, but I even though I've been doing design for how long? Quite a while, right? Let's say
Mm,
maybe a good 15, almost 20 years that I've been doing
right.
design already. I never was within that realm of the illustration side. I knew I was more about the creative, the content, the storytelling aspects of design. So I think that's the thing that struck me the most about storytelling, about
Mm,
creating content, telling people's stories, listening to people's stories. And also as a researcher, I'm always listening to people's stories, always curious about what are the stories that people are telling me. So that's
mm,
something that I've always been quite interested in as a designer, which is other people's stories. So I think that story element is something that I think played a part a little bit. When I think back on how design, being a designer for the past almost
mm.
20 years, going to design school. I did get cheated a little bit to get into design school. So
Oh,
when I was
how?
in,
Hear about it.
um, so after my O levels, I had I think about 14 points lah. Not fantastic, but for a person who had 41 points, I think 14 points is not too bad lah.
So I
So
think I think I think before we carry on, I think for those of you who are not from Singapore, I think the O levels is kind of like a something they will take in high school. They will determine whether you go to a junior college or a polytechnic, right? So it's kind of like a streaming kind of program, and the way they grade you is based on a point basis. The less points you have, the better you are. So if you have an A, you'll be A1. That's the best grade you can get, right? The
yeah.
lowest grade is an F9. So 14 is kind of good. Bad.
I mean, my wife likes to make fun of me. Not, I mean, just jokingly, lah. Because I think she had six, and then after that you have you minus off extra points for CC for your extracurricular activities. I think
Yeah.
she was 4 or 2 or very low, lah. Right? So the 14 is quite high compared to her. But for me, I knew I was going down the path of the polytechnic, lah. So it
Mm,
was a question of which course I was going to take. So I think I was
mm,
thinking whether mass communication, maybe potentially going into business. My parents were thinking, oh, why don't you go into business? Because since
mm.
you're already selling mobile phones, you were selling,
Oh, you were selling
you
mobile phone. You know that?
so in my secondary school days, I bought and sold mobile phones for extra income.
Really?
I bought and sold comic books for extra income as well. So yeah, so that has always been the aspect of my life that was quite interesting. Buying and selling a lot of these products. Whatever I can get, I'll try and sell, get a bit of
Yeah,
extra
yeah,
cash.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was a very big component of what I was doing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was quite interesting from mine. So I was thinking, do I do business? Then I went to the design school at Nanyang Polytechnic, which is
Mm,
one of the institutions in Singapore. And I spoke to this lecturer. And I said, my drawing isn't very good. I'm really not very good at drawing. To be very safe, my drawing is quite shitty. All right. And he said, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. You can do many other things in design.
mm,
Don't worry about it. You can still be a designer. You can do all these other things. There's many other different things you can do. You don't need to draw, blah, blah, blah. Then I was like,
mm,
okay, sure. Then that's what made it my first choice. And then I managed to get in because, 14,
mm,
comparatively is not too bad, right? For the poly.
mm. Yeah.
So that's what got me on. Then I realized only like a year later or 2 years later into the course, I met this lecturer again. And I realized why he said that drawing is important because he was a film lecturer. So to him, he's
Ah,
the film school within the design school, right?
yes,
Uh,
yes, indeed. Yeah.
so to him, of course, you need to draw, but I went down the path of the animation route. So I had to do all the line drawings, the live drawings, go to the zoo and draw. I remember having to draw this turtle, which was like, oh, I still go to the zoo sometimes with my family and I look for that specific turtle.
It's the
I can't
the
remember.
the Cao
The
Turtle.
very turtle that you have. So that turtle and that was something that was always very interesting for what I was looking how I got into the design school lah.
Mm,
And I think um, technically I wasn't and I haven't been a very good technical designer, but at least what I've been able to do is that I've been able to train the eye to say that, hey, this is either a good piece of design or that's a good piece of design. So my skills and my critical thinking of design, that was the thing that I was constantly sharpening over the past 10 15 years to say that how can design be effective in this
mm,
context, or is this a good piece of artwork, is this a good piece of design work, is this a good piece of illustration, so on and so forth.
mm,
Of course, through the technicalities of things, I also will be able to pick that up, right? And move
mm,
into areas of graphics, photography, blah blah blah, and so on. Um,
mm,
sketching, I can sketch maybe in charades lah,
mm,
but
mm, mm,
that's it. You tell me to do line drawings or shadings. My number one, I think my poly lecturer will tell me that my body proportions are all wrong. My shadow lighting is all wrong. Everything is wrong, lah. Essentially, lah. But yes,
mm,
I mean, I'm not an illustrator, and I'm but I do appreciate the beautiful art pieces, beautiful artworks that are
mm,
created by these artists, lah. And I
mm,
can see how some illustrators also progress. So it's also good to see how some illustrators are able to progress in terms of their style to find their own style. So it's also
mm,
interesting those journeys of these illustrators and these artists as well. So yeah.
mm. Okay, so I mean, what you're saying is essentially, you have spent the last couple of years while you're at school developing your taste for good design, right? It could be a good visual design and something that's pleasing to the eye, and because of your affinity and love for comics, you can tell what makes a good piece of comic, right?
Yeah, I mean that's something. I mean, one thing about art is in design, there is a level of subjectivity lah. I mean, I
Mm,
think the core basics of like using color properly, proportions, scale, size, the content, dimensions. So these basics are definitely very very important. But once
mm,
you move outside of that, there is actually the artist's specific drawing style or the designer's own design style, the concept that they create or they present onto the paper, or for whatever technical aspects. I think it's that moves into very subjective. Like some people prefer watercolor
mm.
artworks, some people
Yep.
prefer line, some people prefer Copic, some people prefer digital, right? Some people prefer pencil drawing. So I think there is that level of subjectivity, which I think is it's a good thing for art, because it's not to say art somebody's artwork is bad. I don't think so. Like one artist
Mm-hmm.
I may not really like because it's um a bit too gritty for me. But actually, a lot of people do like that particular person's artwork.
Mm,
Some people like more clean lines or art, in their artworks. Some people like maybe a little bit more uh, a little bit more sketchiness to
mm,
the. So I think there's a subjectivity to that, of how the color is being used.
mm,
Um, also, and I think and that's really it's down to the person who appreciates that artwork, essentially, at the end of the day, which I think is the beauty of illustration. Some people, it's about the story. You can draw comics and you can tell a good story. That's great.
mm,
Without drawing any proportionally correct figures. A lot of the online comics now are doing that. Some are more still down to the aesthetics of it. If you go
mm,
to the artists, they do very beautiful artworks. It's just purely about aesthetics and about photorealistic representations, right? For some, it's how accurate can you draw that particular movie character's face,
mm,
or Some others is more how stylized can you go. I like this particular style. So I think there's so many different types of illustrators out there, and it's worth going through all of them and say that, hey, I would like to, get this person to do an artwork for me, or I like that particular piece of artwork, or I like that artist, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think the art world is, as a person who buys art, of course I'm not talking about, oh, I'm a art collector in that sense, but I buy, I purchase, pieces of artworks that are comic book related, for my own collection and just my own viewing. But yeah, I think the design world and the art world has many different styles, and it's really down to that preference of who is the buyer, and who's the designer, or who is the artist. And I think, I don't think we should, be passing judgment to say that, oh, whether it's good or not good and things like that. So yeah.
So what kind of collector are you? I mean, there are so many different kinds of people with different tastes, right? So how would you describe your collection?
So somewhere in 2000, so I think throughout the 90s, I was buying a lot of I bought quite a bit of comic books. So I had this long box that I packed lah. And then over the years, I read through them, and then these were not key issues, so they were not like, oh, your expensive comic books that are worth a lot of money, right? So to clear space, I sold off a lot of my books. But in terms of comic books, what I recently started to buy over the past few years is I like to buy comic book covers that have very nice covers. So I have a few covers that are, there's no high value to it. Like there's no resale value to these books, but it's just that you see some of these, like there's this artist called Scotty Young. He draws very kiddish Marvel characters. So it's like Spider-Man, head, and I have a few of those comic book covers which I think are quite nice. And then there was days where they packaged the comic book cover to look like an action figure. So just purely based on the aesthetics of that particular cover, I bought a few of these comic books. Other thing that I also started to buy was, in terms of comic books, that was key issues. So, for example, I have here just an example. This is a Captain America book, right? So it's recommended to me by a friend from Ing Collectibles. So Elwin, if you are interested to buy comics, you can always check out Elwin and Ing Collectibles. So this is like the first appearance of Winter Soldier, which is a key issue. So it means that people will want to look for this particular issue if they are looking for, it's a key appearance, like the first appearance of somebody. Then there's something that you want to look into.
Yeah,
so
it's a debut of a character. Yeah.
The debut of a character. So I mean, the very expensive one, like of course the Grail, the holy Grail that for me would be to get a first appearance of Spider-Man, right? But if I were to buy a relatively okay copy, that I would be looking at maybe $30,000, $40,000, which of course I cannot afford, right? Because I cannot afford. But yeah, I want to buy some of these cheaper books. For example, I think the Captain America, I think I paid about $200, but I think these key books typically will go up in price. Some will go up, the price will go up much quicker. Some will go up a little bit slower, right? So this is like maybe like a first appearance of Black Cat, right? So depending on whether a movie comes out, or whether there's a new action figure or something. So sometimes we're not sure what really plays a part in terms of determining the value of that comic book. So I do have a few books, like to get the first appearance of Venom, first appearance of Punisher. So my most, I think, highly valuable one is either the first appearance of Punisher or the first appearance of Deadpool. So those are in the $100, $700 range. There are books that are cost thousands of dollars more. You can buy two or three Rolex watches, or you can pay off half a car for one
Wow,
of these books.
that's
Yeah,
crazy,
but
man. Yeah.
but I mean, I won't. I mean, I don't think I'm quite sure I'm not going to buy unless maybe to
Mm.
when the lottery comes out and I pay $1 and I get $1,000,000 for it, then maybe I'll buy I'll buy one of those books maybe
Right.
lah.
Right.
But I will buy. So those are the two things I buy comic books based on just purely the aesthetics. I like it purely for the aesthetics. And number two, I try to chase these affordable debut appearances or key appearances for these comic books. The other thing that I also started to buy recently was commissioned artwork, right? Like somebody who drew on a particular art comic book, or they drew on a print or piece of paper, and then original artwork, and then you can buy that, right? So, for example, I have one here which is a Star Wars, a Darth Vader, electrocution. So this is by a local artist. If I'm not wrong, his name is Andrew Lowe. I think he's a lecturer at one of the schools. And it's because somebody was telling me, hey, that's my lecturer's work, which is quite cool. I think. I mean, it's a very beautiful, nice piece. When I saw it, I was like, hey, it's cool. I want to have this piece, and I bought it. Another one that I have here is from an artist in an artist from Philippines. So when he came for the comic convention a few years ago, I was like, hey, why don't you do a piece for me? And then so it's a Spider-Man, fighting against Venom, and he thought it was quite nice. So he did a digital version and he sold it as postcard, which is cool. So the idea, he liked it. And then these are all Southeast Asian artists in that sense. So this was also the first I was able to get a local, not local, sorry, a Filipino artist called Rian Gonzalez. Yeah, Rian Gonzalez, and then she's quite, she does a lot of her characters in this particular style. So I also appreciate it, and I thought, hey, this is quite cute. Mary Jane with a cat that is wrapped in a Spider Gwen costume. So that's the artwork that I have, then the ones that are not comic books, I also was able to purchase. Like, for example, this one is a Venom artwork by an American, not wrong, Carlos Dianda. So I mean, these art pieces are, in my eyes, it's very beautifully done, beautifully drawn, and I appreciate the artwork. So you can see, I think the style that I sort of like a little bit more. I mean, of course, I choose the characters that I like. Like Darth Vader is very nice. Spider-Man is great. Venom as well. So these are the characters I like. And I think you can even see in the back here. I have a Deadpool.
Yes, I can see the Deadpool. Yeah.
So Instagram, you can see just above my head there's this Deadpool guy. But so yeah, like this is, I think he's a Marvel artist. So he's drawn for Marvel, and he's printed books. There are printed books that have his artwork. So it's, depending on the name, how famous the person is, of course, the price will go up, right? But there are some others that are good that are not Marvel published or DC comic book published, but they still create quite beautiful pieces. And I think that's a good entry point. Some people will be banking on these artists to get famous eventually. If they're good enough, they get famous eventually. And then if you buy their artworks at a lower price, and then when they get famous, then you will have a very high return on investment lah. Like, for example, I think most of us in the illustration, if you buy comic books or about Singapore artwork, the arts, you will definitely know about Art Germ, right? Stanley.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are inspired by him, and 10 years ago or 15 years ago, he even when I was in Polytechnic 15, 20 years ago, I already knew who he was because I had a friend who was working with him, and his business and everything. He was a very, very amazing illustrator, but in the past few years, he's shot up, to fame, right? Like his artworks are now worth thousands of dollars. Originally maybe like a quarter or a third or a fraction of the price. But over the years, well, he's just shot up in fame.
Mm.
Um, and he's very popular. He does multiple comic book covers for Marvel and in DC as well. He's director of a school. So yeah, his fame has shot up, and some of these examples, like in the sense that an artist is good, but maybe not as famous yet, and then some people will bank on some of these artists as investments. So there are people who buy artwork as investments, but for me, I buy purely to sort of to own these beautiful original pieces of work. That's sort of the perspective I have. Not really to say that I buy in the hope that this will be worth 10 times in the next few years, right?
Mm.
There are other things that I think are worth investing, and some artworks and some comic books are worth investing in. But you have to know the market quite well. You need to follow. You need to know, have a much deeper understanding of the world and the market, which I think is quite not easy to follow. And I think there's a lot of debate going on in terms of which is the real key issue, which is the first appearance, blah blah blah, and so and so forth. So it's a and then you have to follow eBay prices and things like that. So homework and a lot of stress, but I try to sort of just buy purely for the characters that I like. So the first appearances, it's all for me. Most of it is are these characters related to Spider-Man, right? Like the Scarlet Spider, Venom,
Right.
Spider-Man, first Spider-Gwen, first Miles Morales. So these are all Spider-Man related characters that I can get my hands on as a first appearance or a debut appearance on the comic books. So yeah.
Mm. So like for like young artists who are just starting out, how do they attract the attention of a character like you? Because obviously some of them are not going to be commissioned immediately Marvel or DC, right? So where do they start? Because obviously you're on the lookout for new talent in Southeast Asia, right? I mean, you look out for new artists or cool artists to start collecting their stuff, right?
I think like I follow different artists on their Instagram, right? So sometimes I may need to detox because maybe I've spent a little bit too much money. And then I need to detox and say, okay, maybe I just unfollow lah. But when I'm not in the detox mode, right, I will follow artists that I like. I'm like, hey, this person, and Instagram is quite good. So Instagram, if you're following a particular artist, it will also prompt you to say, hey, this other person is also quite similar in that sense. So, you can also follow. And I think this was something that I was talking about in a podcast with somebody else as well, in terms of how to get exposure. One is putting your work out there, but it's also presenting yourself. So you don't want to just be presenting just the artwork itself, but I think it's also about telling your own story, telling people who you are, where you come from.
So how do you see that on an IG post or maybe on an Instagram profile? What do you look out for?
What I look out for, so purely it's just okay. The first thing that will strike me, of course, is it's the work. All right. So if your work is out there, and it's work that I would appreciate and I would like, then that's what will strike me first. So, for example, even for this guy, like so just one example. So this guy, I saw him on Instagram. So this guy is this guy was on Instagram, and I think I was just looking through the hashtags for Singapore, the Singapore toy. In the past, it's called Singapore Toy Game Comic Convention. Now it's Singapore Comics Convention, right? They changed, but anyway, so I was looking at the convention hashtag, and I was looking at artists, I was looking at work, and then so he came up. So he was like, "Oh, okay, this artist is coming. And then let me look at his work. I like it a lot. I like the characters. He's doing commissions. He set his price out very clearly, and I was pleased with the price, so I commissioned him. So it was a very simple process. So I think what made it simple for me was that it was upfront. He was like, okay, I'm doing commissions, number one. Number two, this is my price. Number three, this is my how I'm going to collect money, and this is how I'm going to get payment, blah blah blah, so on and so forth, right? So there is that sense of transparency, right? He's not hiding things like, oh, yeah, let me think about it, let me see, let me do this, let me do that. If you are open to if you do want to do commissions, then you just say that, oh, I'm open to commissions now. These are my rates, blah blah blah, so and so forth. And typically, it's like, okay, 2 characters on a book, or 1 character on a book, or 1 character with a background, 2 characters with a background. Add another character is blah blah blah, price and so on and so forth. So I mean, of course, what I'm talking about is within the comic book world, comic books. I mean, there are people who do commissions for other types of artworks, for family portraits and things like that, right? But for me, purely just in terms of comic book commissions, I think transparency is very upfront. I think the market, a lot of people buy. There are a lot of people who buy artworks, and people decide based on price, like to say that, hey, this person is a bit too expensive, or that person is a bit too expensive. So they have to see their value. Like, how famous am I? How many people do I have following me? How many? What's the rate that I typically will charge? So I think they need to be able to find their balance. I mean, no, don't do anything for free. Not say don't do it, but I mean, you shouldn't be be taken advantage of, exploited. I mean, free, you like go for your friends, that's fine. But I mean, I think people must sort of be able to peg their value from that. And I think just be clear on the pricing. So, put up the price and then showcase to people, say, hey, these are my rates. These are the things that I will be charging for. This is how long the turnover is for this particular project. And that's how much I'm going to charge. Hey, hi, Subhan. But yeah. So I think that's something that I think artists in the comic book sort of world, I think need to be quite upfront with. And I think most artists are. I don't think I've seen people who we're too secretive. So I think if you're new to this, showcase what you can do, and then say, hey, I'm taking commissions. Who's keen to sign up for my commissions? They'll take roughly 1 to 2 weeks, or blah, so and so forth, and things like that. So just be clear. And number one is put your work out there. If you don't put your work out there, nobody's going to know that you're an illustrator, right? If you go and just hide everything in your journal and not show anybody, then it's very hard for you to see and for you to be exposed enough to find potential customers or clients. And once you get the exposure, it's also being upfront in terms of, yes, I'm going to be charging, and these are the rates that I'll be charging for.
Okay. I think those are some really good tips that you have for for someone who wants to start out and to get into this whole comic drawing industry, right? Because I think there's a lot of folks who are big fans of different titles, and they want to just participate in that and hopefully get a gig from Marvel or DC, whatnot.
Yeah.
So, being able to hear from a comic art collector like yourself, to know what are some of the things that they can do to get themselves known, I think that's really, really helpful. Yeah.
I think also, just to add on also, is to know your market. Because, for example, on Facebook, there is Singapore Comics, it's SCC. So basically, it's like a Singapore comic collectors group. And, they have thousands of people there. So, you can you will, on a day-to-day average, you can see what people are posting, what are the characters that they like, what are the things they're discussing about. Who are the artists that they also are willing to pay money for. There are people on the group that, when I'm expensive, we're talking about these, world renowned artists that come, like the Frank Chos and Ryan, I cannot get his last name, Ryan Metz and all these people. When they come to Singapore, we're talking about, at one point, one day, or in a span of 3 days, we're talking about tens and thousands of dollars are being spent. So if you can really get your work out there, grow the exposure. Of course, you're not going to start out and say, oh, my first piece should be $10,000, right? But I think that can be a goal that you strive for, whether it's in terms of efficacy of your work, or whether it's with regards to another quality creating.
Oh, I think you're breaking up on your end again. You're breaking up again on your end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's. I mean, what you're saying is also as a young artist, someone's got to be realistic, right, in terms of the expectations that they have. You're not going to be famous. You can be famous,
Mm,
maybe by a stroke of luck, or maybe your work is so good that instantly it connects with a big audience. But generally, people take time to grow their audience, to make themselves known out there. So it takes effort. So it's important
mm,
to be grounded and realistic about the goals that they set for themselves. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, so what do you think about the comics industry in Singapore? How do you think it's like right now?
So comic book shop lah. I mean, I started with comic book shops. And by no means am I the major expert in this lah. Right, just this purely on my own experiences lah. I think there's only a handful of comic book shops, and I think the market, the comic book buyers, they do know which are the ones that are a bit pricier, which are the ones that are cheaper, which are the ones that you are able to get particular books from. You talk about, like there is Plaza Singapura, Park Lane. You talk about, Holland Village. These are your major famous comic book shops that are still around. There used to be one in Tanglin, then the one we were talking about, Jade World or JJ. These are old institutions that we think of from our memory.
Yeah,
But in
very
terms
old.
of modern days, I think there are a lot of people who are buying from the States, just purely about comic books lah, and people buy from eBay a lot. So there's a lot of import from international sources. So locally, I think the artists, the art world. I mean, I think there is a big pool of people who are doing illustrations, and I think there is a bigger pool of people who are drawing for the anime or gaming. From what I see at conventions, more people are drawing anime characters,
Mm-hmm.
gaming characters. So I think there seems to be a bigger market there. Not
Mm.
so much the comic book, Western comic book world lah. I mean, there are a few people who do draw that, but I think, from what I see, I think like people in the Philippines, Indonesian artists, these are the ones that are drawing a little bit more in terms of that Western, those Western comic book characters. I think locally, there's still a very big market for the gaming characters as well as the anime characters. So I think there's a cultural significance here in terms of what is popular for the local market in Singapore. So this is just based on me when I go to comic conventions and I see, what are people drawing, right? What are people selling? So I mean, I noticed that there's a lot more Asian or gaming artwork there. Not so much the Western comic books. I mean, not to say that there is very little, but I would say maybe it's about 60-40%. Yeah, 60% is more of the Asian games, the Asian comic books or Asian anime characters, and gaming characters, and then maybe about 40-35% is more of your your Marvel, your DC, and so on and so forth lah. So I think there's a good mix. I think I mean I think there's a good mix. So there's a bit of diversity which I think is quite cool, because like I also sort of know about, there's that particular game character which is quite interesting, that particular anime character, and I think that there's a relationship to that, because Singapore also there's quite a big there's a big cosplay culture here in Singapore. I think there's a lot of people who do cosplay. There are people who take photos for cosplay as well. So I think the market is naturally feeding itself lah, based on what people like, what the preferences and so on and so forth. So it's also worth sort of identifying to say that, okay, if I were to sell more of draw more characters for gaming or anime, will I get more sales in my memorabilia, in terms of my artwork and so on and so forth? So I think do a bit more. You need to artists need to do a bit more research. It's not, the worst, I think, scenario, not say worst scenario, but a scenario that is not the best would be to say that, oh, I really like this very super obscure character, right? But only people who know this character will appreciate my drawing and my artwork, right?
Right.
Which is not a bad thing, but it's just a question of demand and supply, right? Sure, that obscure character is good, you like it, when nobody's saying that it's bad, feel free to draw that character. But if we're thinking about it from a sales perspective, then we need to consider and say that, okay, if I want to sell more artworks or I want to increase the value of my artwork and so on and so forth, I may draw characters that are a little bit more popular in that sense lah. Yeah. So that's something to think about, and just to I think just doing a bit more of research into the market, that will definitely help lah.
So like right now we have all this restrictions in travel and locking the lockdown or rather the circuit breaker taking place and lockdowns across the region, and conventions also of like taking a wait and see approach. Some are even delayed. And I guess this is a question more for pro artists and more seasoned artists who are in this industry.
Yeah.
How do you think they can actually expose their, or rather, continue to market out their work? Because obviously conventions are one platform for them to put out their work, right? What do you think are some of the strategies? As a design professor, what do you think are some of the strategies all these pros can do?
I think that you need to have I think you need to have a good network. So I think the artists that have been coming to Singapore quite often, for the conventions previously, I think from what I recall, this just from what I see in the Singapore comics collectors group on Facebook, is that they've started to do some kind of like a commission list, like the artist may be in the States or maybe in some other country, and there are Malaysian and Singaporean people who want to buy their artworks. So they've started a commission list and they showcase lah. So in the group, they start to share and say that, hey, this artist may not be coming for convention this year, but he's still opening commissions.
Okay.
So I think number one is to be able to build a network with build a relationship with the customers that you potentially will be having.
So who will be the important people for them to look out for? Is it the convention organizers? Is it going to be just like a special group of collectors?
If you are already in the know of who are the collectors in the group, then I think that would be a great person to go and talk to. So I think Singapore actually, the person that I bought a lot of this artwork from, these works from, his name is Elwin. So he sort of works as a mediator between artists and buyers in Singapore. So sometimes also there are distributors or agents. So in the art world, like let's say you want to buy a art piece from let's say a very famous artist, let's say Jim Lee or whoever. You don't actually speak to that guy directly. You speak to an agent. So the agent is the one that's representing that artist and say that, okay, this person is having a list, and then you're going to buy the artwork from that person, right? And so some people, you can reach that stage to find an agent if you want. Some people can either do it on their own, but you need to, I guess, either number one is go and find somebody who can represent you if you have the resources or the money to go and do that. If you can afford to, if you can't, then you need to go straight to the source of income, which is the collectors themselves, right? If you're going to be drawing for comic book nervous, then you need to go and start talking to them and sort of showing them what is the thing that you can do, and then you
Mm,
build those communications, build those relationships.
mm,
And yeah, it's about, if you find people who appreciate your artwork, those are the first people that you go and speak to. Even for me, like if I'm doing when I'm creating my own content, like my podcast or things like that, if I have people who do listen to my podcast, those are the people that I will typically go to first and say, hey, what can I improve? What would you like to hear? What are the things
mm,
that you want to listen on? What can I improve on? Is the visual good enough for you? Is the
mm,
sound good enough for you? Am I talking too quickly? Blah blah blah, so on and so forth. So I'm getting feedback from the people who are consuming my content.
mm,
Similarly, as an artist, you need to go and get feedback and get from these potential customers that you are going to be engaging with. So I think identifying who your potential customers are going to
mm,
be very important, right? So if you somebody's liking a lot of your posts, then you take a step, just find them and say, hey, thanks for liking my post. I'm planning to do prints. Do a print run of my artwork. Find do this and that. Then go and where can I what can I do? So I think an artist, there's there are different means, right? You can draw original artwork, like one-off original pieces that you
mm,
can sell to people. You can either do that, or you can sell prints, right? You draw something digitally, or you draw it on paper, and then you can scan it whichever way you want, and then you can have multiple you can have a print run of a particular artwork, right?
mm,
And yeah, we've seen some people who have like drawn one really amazing piece of artwork. So many people like it, and they just say, okay, I have found a lot of fans of my work, I'm going to do a print run. But it needs to start from that source where
right,
you're connecting with the client, your potential clients, your potential customers.
right, right.
And I think that's the number one thing that people need to do first, which is to reach out to that community first. If you know you
Mm,
want to go into the anime gaming world, then you need to go and start talking to people who play the game. Go onto
mm,
Twitch. Go and see who the streamers are, what they're doing, what the popular ones, what the characters that are popular in the game, blah blah, blah, so and so forth. Right? If you want to move the comic books, then go and research into comic books. Go and read up or more on go read up more on what are the modern day books that are being sold, what are the stories that are, who are the characters. Like, I mean, if I tell you this guy called Cosmic Ghost Rider, right? No spoilers as to who this character is, but
mm,
people are like, oh, Ghost Rider is, Ghost Rider, everybody knows about Ghost. Most people know about Ghost Rider as a character, right? But not many people know that there's this new character called Cosmic Ghost Rider, right? And he's quite popular. He's like a $4 or $5 book that came out 2 or 3 years ago. Now that book just on its own is about $100, right? Just for that book that's not graded at all, right? That's $100 book.
mm, right.
So so the value of that character has gone up because it's such a popular character. But if you don't know who these characters are, then you won't know who is popular, and you draw some of the characters that you think are popular. Then there is a mismatch in terms of you
Mm.
and your potential clients. So yeah,
So,
I
so
think
you're saying
that's a
it's important for artists to pick and choose their fights, right? Because if you pick a good character to work with, chances are, the artwork can be bought by collectors will be higher because there's a demand for it, right? So they need to
definitely.
basically know some basic, simple demand and supply, uh, you know, theory out there, yeah. Because if there's too
Yeah,
much of a
very.
supply of a particular character, you're fighting with so many different artworks. What are odds of your work being chosen a collector? But
Yeah.
if you pick a fairly obscure one, hey, maybe he may not be known today, but some collector who is a really big fan of that particular superhero, he or she may just buy it, and that could be a first client to to build a relationship
Mhm.
with.
Um, I
Yeah.
mean, I think the number one thing is still going to be do your research. I think I mean, everything that I tell my students always is to go and do your research, right?
Mm,
Every day it's we teach a research based pedagogy, which is to say that
mm,
everything, whatever design projects that you do, it always starts with research. Research is your number one tool to get to understand the market, understand who are the characters, who are the players, go and find out, more about the social statuses, or the culture of that particular group. Go and learn more about, the more you learn about that particular context, or culture that you're trying to move into, the easier your job will be, right? Determining on which character to draw, or what style to go for, or how does your style fit in, and so on and so forth. Does it match? Does it not? So I think those decisions have to be based off the research you collected. Definitely, that's a number one thing that needs to be done.
Right. So is there one final thing that you can, leave off for all our viewers here tonight before we actually, end up the show?
Yeah,
Especially for comic artists, what's one word of advice or one tip that you can leave them with?
for me, I think as a buyer, as a person who buys artwork, I mean, what stands out for me is that there are artists that have their own very clear illustration style. All right, if you think of famous, people like Todd McFarlane, you think of your Mark Brooks, your Alex Ross, your Jim Lee.
Mm-hmm.
When you go back to your originals, like your John Romita, John Romita Senior, John Romita Junior. These are famous artists, but when you think of the artworks of these famous artists, you can see a very, very, very clear style. I will never call. Once you look at a Todd McFarlane's work, and you look at a John Romita's work, or you look at a Jim Lee's work, or you look at an Alex Ross piece of artwork, right? You know which piece was drawn by which person. So I think one important thing is to be able to go and have your own identity as an illustrator, and figure out your own design style. I think what made Scotty Young very famous, it's worth researching into him, is his design style. He's very cute, Venom eating a lollipop artwork. I think he's famous, Thanos piece, or Doctor Doom's. These very menacing characters drawn in such a cute way. People are drawn to that, and his artworks have now got they got statues based off his artworks, right? So and I think that's a very unique part. The other although other famous also quite artist is J. Scott Campbell, right? So J. Scott Campbell, he's got a very unique way of drawing women, right? He in terms of the figure, the sharp faces. So he does draw the figures. He's a very unique drawing style. So when you look at it, it's there's no way you will mistake that person's artwork for someone else's. So I think what's good, it's good to reference other people and other illustrators, and how they draw their artworks. I think that's good. It's fine. But when you're thinking about creating your own identity as an illustrator, it's definitely worth drawing in your own unique style that no one else can mistake you for someone else. So I think find your identity as an illustrator, and people will come to you. Don't try to follow someone else and just draw in another person's design drawing style. I think as a consumer, I cannot safely say as an illustrator, I cannot give you the tips on how to really create a unique style. That one you have to go and ask Dom on tips of how to be unique in your drawing style. All right, but for me as a consumer, I think what stands out the most is going to be the uniqueness of that particular artwork, and that design style. Because in design, in business, the question is always, what's your unique selling point? How are you different from the other players in the market? All right. So similarly, when you're talking about comic books, or you're talking about artwork and artists, that's also something that you need to think about, right? Which is to say that how am I if I'm an illustrator with another guy in the same school, and we draw very similar styles, when we both graduate, how are we going to be separated from each other, right? We're drawing so similarly. I need to find my own drawing style that's unique, or I need to draw something that's unique, to me. So I think, find your style, and then just go with it. Draw your own characters. create your own stories and develop your own characters. I think that's a good way to go. I think that's something that I would definitely like to see in terms of how these people are going. So yeah.